Okay, so it is Tuesday, September 5th. Every week I do a weekly recap, and I started doing them on Saturdays, and then I bumped that from Saturday to Sunday. And yesterday was Labor Day, so I just got lazy on Sunday and Monday, and here we are. So we're going to recap from last Sunday, Sunday the 27th, through Monday yesterday. Okay, so here's what's been happening in Ukraine. Sunday the 27th, Prigozhin was confirmed dead, actually confirmed dead, and there were multiple articles about Prigozhin's legacy and things along those lines. RT had an article that was talking about the BRICS will make up a majority of the global economy, but as I said last week, it's kind of like saying, well, we're making up the more of the sneaker market, but Nike and Reebok and Adidas are out of this. They're the G7, so we're going to pick up Fila and Vans and Walmart brand and One and things along those lines. It's really not as big as, I mean, it's big, but it's really not as strong as what they were like it to sound like. 20 years, there was an article about 20 years of how Putin has silenced his operation with planes, hotels, people falling out of hotel balconies, poisonings. It was very insightful. Mitt Romney talked about how Ukraine, using the fight in Ukraine was a great deal because it was actually degrading Russia in a very cost-effective way. And RT was having, like, they were throwing fits about how can he be saying this? Okay. Hunter Biden's connection to Ukraine, it looks like, according to the New York Post, it looked like it might have been some kind of protection for illegal activities. I don't know if it is. I don't know if Biden was involved in this, but if he was, it's bad. And if he wasn't, it can still be used to as a weapon against Ukraine to say, see, some corruption was going on here. Well, where's the corruption? We don't know. It's a corruption, it's a scandal, it's a conspiracy to, right? I mean, they can keep doing that, and so that's all bad as well. Zelensky was proposing equating a law equating corruption with treason during the war, and I think that fundamentally there's something sound about that, but we'll have to see what the details are. Tucker Carlson wanted to interview Vladimir Putin, and he's been making noise about that. Trump raised $7.1 million on his mugshot after his arrest. I mean, yeah, and his poll numbers actually went up after his arrest. So it's kind of backfiring. These kind of things are only making Trump bigger. And if you want Trump to be the nominee, you couldn't hardly do anything more than what they've done, which has built him up because people perceive that, rightly or wrongly, as some kind of political persecution. Whether they should or not is immaterial. They are, and that's becoming a problem. Ukrainian forces are in striking distance of the next defense lines in Zaporizhia, and Ukraine is showing off its next generation of underwater drone. That's where I ended this time last week when I went through this last Sunday. Okay, so Monday, Reznikov said there's no need to increase the number of soldiers. Now that was important because just a few days earlier, Zelensky said that the military asked him to increase the number of soldiers. So Reznikov was saying just the opposite, and I thought, that's strange. Later on in the week, you'll see why I am connecting these dots. Pravda, it said 2024, the assassination of Zelensky and biggest battle are to take place. Well, okay, anybody could write that article. Nothing actually happened. They're just speculating on what might be happening. Ukraine captures a key village in Zaporizhia front, and they are making legitimate progress there. And then the ex-Ukraine prosecutor was claiming that Biden was involved in some kind of nefarious operations in Ukraine, and he was, a GOP lawmaker, Mike Johnson, was saying this should be the top story everywhere. And if it's true, it should be the top story. But we don't know if it's true, and that's really the trick. So I don't know if it's true yet, but if it is, it's shameful, and it should be the top story. If it's not, it'll still probably be used against Biden and Ukraine, unfortunately, when Ukraine really can't. It's really, really bad for Ukraine if this gets smeared and used in such a way that it's making it harder for them to get the weapons that they need. Okay, Tuesday, the 29th of August, Ukrainian Defense Forces lose 40 to 45 reconnaissance drones per day. Now that's about $11,000 at about $250 to $300 a pop. But that's what they're using to be able to target their enemies. And it's really interesting how just these little, like, hobbyist drones have become such an influential weapon in Ukraine. Then we had Prigozhin's funeral. It was closed to the public. It was in St. Petersburg. Putin did not attend. It was a private event, and that would have been just disgraceful to show up given what had just happened. The Pope's recent remarks sparked outrage. So a couple days ago, this is Tuesday the 29th, a couple days earlier, the Pope he was talking to Catholic priests, don't forget your heritage. You are descendants of great Russia, the great Russia of saints, rulers, and the great Russia of Peter I, Catherine II. That empire educated a great culture and great humanity. Now he's trying to encourage his Catholic priests, but it kind of sounded tone deaf. Like, given the circumstances of what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, it sounds like he's backing Russia. He wasn't really doing that. He was just trying to be, from my read of it, just trying to be encouraging to his priest. But yeah. Okay, more than 1,000 schools have been destroyed in Ukraine since the war began. Like, okay, destroying a school would be a war crime, right? And 1,000 of these, now some of them probably accidental, or maybe there were soldiers hiding in it, but not 1,000 of them. And so, yeah, it's bad. These are war crimes. There was another interesting article that was juxtaposed against this, and that was that Finland counted its bomb shelters and found that it had 50,500 bomb shelters. Now, why did they have bomb shelters? Because they had a law in the 1950s. I'm going to read this. The wary Nordic country made construction of emergency shelters mandatory under apartment blocks and office buildings as early as the 1950s, which explains the current number. Why? Because of Russia. Like, that's what's causing this. So everybody in a neighborhood knows that Russia is the problem, except Russia. Like, it's kind of like your crazy uncle who everybody kind of at Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner is trying to just gently walk around, but everybody knows that he's the problem except him, who's, got the anger issues or the drinking problem or whatever it is. It's kind of like that with Russia. Okay, Ukrainian lawmakers potentially decriminalize porn. Just an interesting article. I don't know what will happen with that, but I mean, there are bigger battles to fight in the middle of a war, but just letting you know what's going on. Articles about Prigozhin's downfall continued on Wednesday. There were huge explosions in Kyiv as some missiles got through. 20 were shot down, but some got through. Ukrainian drones on Wednesday. This was the big story last week. Ukrainian drones attacked 7 regions of Russia at night, simultaneously, including the airbase in Pskov. I said Peskov because, I mean, I was just reading it like it spelled out in English, but it's Pskov. And this is really interesting because it was right near the Estonian border, and immediately Russia was saying they're invading from NATO, and Jackson Hinkle was alluding to this, and others, they weren't. It looks like most likely these are people within Russia, whether they're Ukrainian or Russian, but within Russia, setting off these drones. And that is a crazy danger for the massive 11 time zone mighty Russia, because yeah, it's going to be hard to defend all that. Ukraine claimed that it used cardboard drones from Australia to destroy Russian jets. That's actually proven to be the case, that they were using these waxed cardboard things that cost few $1,000s when you include the GPS device and you include the explosives on the cardboard plane. It's pretty amazing what they were able to do. We're all the front line, says Russians struck by military drones from Ukraine. The Russians get it. I mean, people get it. They understand that they're actually that they're involved in this war. There's another article that's talking about how they didn't want the war, but they don't want to lose it either. And I understand that, but you really have to think about the justice of the matter as well. There's a bill in the Verkhovna Rada that parliamentarians shall go to the front along with the people, that they're not exempt from this, that if their number's called, they go to the front. And I think that legislator made himself probably pretty uncomfortable, but how do you vote against that? Progress in the front line in the south, they're making some headway. They're getting through that first major trench line, the Surovikin line, and they're making some headway. There was a report that Zelensky bombed his first meeting with Biden. What I mean by that, bomb, not like with explosives, but his first meeting with Biden just didn't go well. This was in 2021, September of 2021. The two men I'm reading the report. Quote, the two men reportedly failed to establish a rapport as Ukrainian leaders demand to join NATO. An absurd analysis of alliance dynamics left the U.S. president, quote, pissed off, unquote. Well, had he been able to join NATO in 2021, would have been a different story, but they weren't actually able to. Russia was in part of the country. Unless they wanted to lose the Donbass and Crimea, they wouldn't have been able to do it anyway. But it's really interesting. U.S. and Russia discuss alternative to the Black Sea grain deal. They're still trying to work that out. It hasn't gone anywhere. Ukraine's making gains in the southern front. Well, here's an interesting article on Wednesday. The 59% of Indians, like Indians, 59% of Indians back Putin. Just 12% approval average across many other nations. So Putin has an average approval rating of 12% across other nations, but Indians, for whatever reason, they are fine with Putin. They're fine. They're getting the cheap oil. They're fine with whatever he's doing. It doesn't bother them. The EU imports of Russian liquefied natural gas are up by 40%. 40%? What? Like, that liquefied natural gas is actually funding the war. Like, that's what's going on, but Europeans are still importing it. Ukraine and Norway agreed to a transport visa-free regime with cargo without permits. They could just smooth the treads on that and be able to get material out, material or grain or whatever else. RT says it's Tucker Carlson. They talked about him and his interview where he said that the U.S. is headed for a hot war with Russia, that we will lose. Like, Tucker really said that. I talked about it in the video just a few days ago. But of course, they're going to replay that because that falls right into RT's narrative. Top Republican Michael McCaul, he's the chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He called Vivek's plan, Vivek Ramaswamy, his plan to deal with Putin as surrender to Russian aggression, and that really is. And Vivek's plan is simply, we're going to make a trade with Putin. You uncouple your alliance with Russia, and you can have this land in Ukraine and walk away from it scot-free, and we'll withdraw our aid from Ukraine. It's awfully cavalier, in my estimation, with trading on the lives of the Ukrainians who are the victims here. So that's wrong on that level. But it's also wrong that he thinks that Putin's going to tell the truth and make a deal and be able to be held to that. I mean, that's just silly. Yeah. Commentary, few Russians, this is what I was talking about earlier, few Russians wanted the war in Ukraine, but they won't accept Russian defeat, and I think you're going to see that dynamic play out more and more over time. Okay, Thursday, 31 August, Pravda says that Tucker is carrying again that the U.S. will go to war with Russia in 2024. RT was saying that Ukrainian commandos were killed in Russia in the Bryansk region. Now, that may or may not be true. I haven't been able to follow up on that, but that was, I think, one of the areas that was hit by the drones, and so maybe they found Ukrainian commandos that were launching those drones. I don't know enough to be able to say definitively one way or the other. There was an article about how Prigozhin spoke of threats to his life just days before his death. Well, I mean, he knew he was a marked man and probably should have kept a lower profile. RT talked about Ukraine threatens long-range strikes into Russia. There's going to be more and more of them. It's almost inevitable. I don't know how you couldn't see that this is coming, but that is what will be happening. Kaliba tells listeners to shut up when they talk about the slowness of the counteroffensive. He said it's like spitting in the face of soldiers. Here's a quote: criticizing the slow pace of the counteroffensive equals spitting into the face of the Ukrainian soldier who sacrifices his life every day moving forward and liberating 1 kilometer of Ukrainian soil after another. I understand his frustration. I think that we need to reset, and I did a video about this, reset our expectations of what they can do given the resources that they actually have. Grant Shapps is appointed the new British Defense Minister. Now, reading about him, now this is important because personnel is policy. He doesn't have a lot of background in defense, and he has a lot of catch-up, but he was minister of 6 different areas before this, so he's a reliable, trustworthy guy to be in charge, and they trust him to make some decisions. Top issues that Shapps will be facing will be how to supply Ukraine and increasing the defense spending in Britain because they're about to get to an election. They want to go from like 2.1% to maybe 2.5%, but that's a big jump in taxes in Britain. Okay, Zelensky vows to stamp out corruption in the military draft process. He's already cracking down on the regional heads of the recruitment centers, and there was some scandal about how these guys were like exempting people for disability. So now they're going to go back and check all the people that were exempted for disability. Do they really have the disability that they thought that they had, or do they need to be sent into the military? And so Zelensky is cracking down on corruption, and like that's why he came to office to begin with, was to crack down on corruption. Interestingly, if you have Netflix, watch Servant of the People, and in the first or second season, I don't remember which, but there was all kinds of like scandals of like they couldn't find a judge that was not corrupt. In a couple of episodes they were like trying to find this, and so they were focusing on corruption that has been, but Zelensky has been working at it, and there's no better time right now than to do it during the war and use it as a means of combating what's going on. Like, stop the corruption, because the corruption's hurting our war effort. Right now is a time to nip that in the bud. Okay, Russia's new history book, full of propaganda. So this is Thursday, the 31st of August, and on Friday, September 1st, everybody goes back to school in that part of the world, right? And it varies. It's very similar in the United States. Some are already back, some are going back just after Labor Day, but it's about this time of year. So in Russia, their new history book is just full of propaganda. I'm going to read a quote here. Quote, wording on the pages depicted in the photos published by RBK repeats President Vladimir Putin's false claims that Ukraine is an ultra-nationalist and, quote, neo-Nazi state, that Kyiv is controlled by the West, which seeks to dismember Russia and steal its natural resources, that NATO advisors pushed Kyiv to, quote, attack the Donbass in 2020, that strictly secret U.S. biolaboratories were created in Ukraine, that Kyiv has been aggressively seeking to acquire nuclear weapons, and more. Okay, it's full of lies and full of propaganda, but this is what's going to go into the heads of Russians in high school, and Putin knows what he's doing. He is grooming the next generation. Okay, Friday, September 1st, there's a report that Russia seriously tried to kill Zelensky a number of times, according to Budanov, the head of the main intelligence agency, and we've talked about that before. I did an entire video about that a week or two ago. Ramaswamy isolates himself on Ukraine with his proposed Putin pact, and we just talked about that, so I'm not going to go into that. NATO, well, let's see, RT says that Marjorie Taylor Greene said that the rise of the BRICS will be devastating to the U.S. So they're going to add 6 new countries to the BRICS in January, including Argentina and the UAE and was it Saudi Arabia or somebody? I don't remember exactly who it was, but it's not really. I don't think it's that devastating. I mean, they want to be a trading bloc, and like some of them have said, we don't want to be a military alliance. We just want to trade more freely. The ISW said Ukrainian forces reached parity with Russia for the first time in counter-battery capabilities. And so that's important. And they have really been outmatched in many regards throughout the war. And so reaching parity in any regard is a positive step. Pravda says that Putin is not ready to see Kyiv in ruins. He's just not ready. Now, this is kind of the Scott Ritter kind of narrative where, well, if Putin really wanted to destroy the place, he would have destroyed it a long time ago. He's being gentle. Really? No, he's not. He can't destroy it. He's not able to. I mean, he could with a nuclear weapon, but then he would be a pariah. The cost is greater than what he's actually gaining for that. So Putin's not ready to see Kyiv in ruins. He said, here's a quote from the article. People ask me, when are we going to win? It can even be tomorrow, but ordinary Ukrainians need to understand something. I will never forget what the president said to me a year ago. I'm not ready to see Kyiv in ruins. Like, oh, how noble of you. But it's really that he can't actually cause what he's trying to do. And it's apparent that Putin thought he could take the country in 2 weeks, and we've seen. I mean, this is in writing from Putin actually saying these kind of things. Okay, commentary said that time is running out for the counteroffensive. This was in the Guardian. I think there's something to that. They have to get some small wins, and they have to do it pretty soon. So time is running out, so they have to run up. They can't just run out the clock. They have to score some points. Russian military hackers were seeking to Ukrainian soldiers' battle plans, and I don't know how effective they were, but they were working at that. Another article talked about murder, tortures, and sexual violence, Russian crimes against children. Ukraine has opened more than 3,000 criminal cases over Russia's alleged crimes against children in the country, including dozens of torture cases. Like, I mean, if you want to know who's the good guys and who are the bad guys, who are the side that are torturing or violently sexually assaulting children, that's probably the bad guys. Okay, British defense firm BAE is to open up a location in Ukraine, and the Russians are going nuts about that. The BBC said a drone attack on Pskov air base was from inside Russia. Now, it seemed a little bit unrealistic that they could have gotten it all the way from the Ukraine border to there, and it seemed like there's no way they're going to do it from Estonia, like from a NATO country to do it, so that just makes sense. Swedish lawmakers were to boycott the Nobel Prize ceremony, and because they said, hey, this was on Friday, I guess it was. It was a Friday, yeah, on Friday, because they said that they were going to do that, the Nobel Prize committee reversed itself the next day. Kuleba said that Ukraine's partners understand that the counteroffensive is moving in the right direction, and there is evidence that it is moving in the right direction. Reuters said that the U.S. sees the progress in Zaporizhia. Zelensky said, we're doing everything here to return to online or to offline education, away from just online education. Like there are pictures of students in the subways because that's where they could be protected, and trying to learn there, like, I mean, 1,000 schools destroyed, right? Another interesting article is why training Ukrainians on Swedish Gripen is important. That's Sweden's plane. It's a cold weather plane, but it's very similar to F-16s. And so if they can get trained on that, they would, even if Sweden doesn't give them Gripens, if they could train on it, they'd be many steps forward toward understanding how to fly the F-16. And so it was an interesting article for that reason. And then finally, 2 more ships leave the Black Sea through the temporary grain corridor. The first one was from Hong Kong, and the Russians weren't going to fire on a Chinese ship. The second one was from Liberia. The third one now was also from Liberia, and the fourth was from the Marshall Islands. If you don't know where the Marshall Islands are, it's okay. I had to look it up too. I knew it was somewhere in the Pacific, but it's about halfway between Hawaii and Indonesia. And so it's just a bad look if you fire on a ship for that, or for Liberia. And so they didn't fire on it. Okay, Saturday, September 2nd, Kolominsky. He is the oligarch that kind of set Zelensky on his path as a comedian and producer, and he's been notified of suspicion of fraud, and he looks like he's going to be going to jail, or actually he's in jail. He has a $14 million bail, and again, Zelensky's cleaning up corruption. The Nobel Prize Committee canceled the Russian-Belarusian invitation on Saturday. Medvedev said that Western backers are pro-Nazi coalition. Quote, I'm quoting now, all of them are directed and obvious Nazi accomplices. That's everyone in the West. Direct and obvious Nazi accomplices. Adding, he said, that, quote, they should be treated as the leaders of a pro-Nazi coalition. Let's stop there for a moment. During World War II, if you ask people in Germany, are you Nazis? They would say, I'm Nazi. Like, they would have admitted it. But in Russia and Ukraine, if you ask, who are the Nazis? They're like, what Nazis? There's no Nazis here. Who's Nazi? Right? So, and I know that they don't mean Nazi like Hail Hitler, but they mean Nazi like in a broader general sense. But this is a terrible use of the word Nazi. And no, we're not pro-Nazi. Okay, Ukraine has broken the first line of defense near Zaporizhia. That's good to see. The UK MOD says that Russia risks dividing its forces to defend against the breakthrough. And that's really interesting because now Russia has a problem. They can go this way or they can go that way. And depending on where they go, they have to anticipate where the Ukrainians are going to break through and get to, and it's creating a headache for the Russians. Russia also claimed that it destroyed sea drones used to attack the Kerch Bridge. There was an attack on the Kerch Bridge. It didn't actually take, but it looks like it's not going to be too terribly long before there's going to be another attack on the Kerch. The German Green Party leader, who is now a member of the European Parliament, said that Europe must learn from mistakes with Russia to get its policy on China right. That's what I've been saying this entire time. So one of the reasons so we have to defend Ukraine because it's the right thing and because they're the victims, but we're also having to do that because China's watching. And unless you want to have a hot war with China, if you let this go and China gets the message that, hey, this is okay. If you try to seize this land, nothing bad will happen. Unless you get this right and stop Putin here, Xi is more likely to try to take Taiwan. So I think that there's something really right about this. He's a Green Party leader, but he's right. I mean, I'm as conservative, probably as far on the political spectrum from him as possible, but I think he's absolutely 100% right. Counteroffensive has made notable progress over the last few days, and that's the last article from Saturday. Sunday, a Ukrainian court, $14 million bail for Kolomoisky. That's the oligarch I was just talking about. Zelensky discusses the grain corridor with Macron. Ukrainian drone targets Kursk, but I don't know a lot about that beyond just that one little headline about it. Ukrainian women, this was fun. Ukrainian women finally getting female uniforms. There are 5,000 women in uniform in Ukraine, and they've been wearing male uniforms that they were just trying to cinch up or sew in a way that it wasn't going to be ill-fitting. But like, they're now not going to have to wear men's boxers. I mean, it's just yes, finally, it's good that they're getting this sorted out. Cheap hobby drones become one of the Ukraine's most vital weapons. Like these kind of things, like my sons actually have these kind of drones, cost a couple $100. That's what Ukraine is using to be their eyes and ears to find Russians and to target their artillery or their soldiers in trenches or what have you. And they cost $200, $300 each. Something very simple, but it's really important. Ukraine has received $100 billion in military aid from Western backers, says Reznikov. Now, that's really interesting, not just how much has been raised, but says Reznikov, because Zelensky also moved on Saturday to fire Reznikov. Reznikov he's been the head of the military establishment since the war began, and it looks like he's on his way out. And he's probably on his way out, it looks like, because while I don't think he did anything, and I'm probably going to do a video just about him and his replacement, because personnel is policy, this matters. While he doesn't look like he was corrupt, corruption happened on his watch beneath him, and it looks bad. I think there's more to the story, and I'm going to try to track that down. Monday, the 4th of September, Pravda says more about Zelensky and Reznikov, and so I read some background about this, and his replacement is Rustem Umerov. And Rustem Umerov is a Crimean Tatar, and I think there's something to that as well, the connection. He's a Crimean Tatar, and so it's making kind of a statement like we're coming for Crimea, but that's not all of it. And he's a known quantity. He seems like a good guy from everything that I've read, and so that's what's going on there. Ukrainians in occupied areas are forced to vote in a pseudo-election. This is coming to an election booth in the occupied territories very soon. Scott Ritter talks about how there's a comprehensive Ukrainian defeat as the only possible outcome. That's an exciting article. I might do a video about that as well. Russians carry out 5 missile and 68 airstrikes on Sunday to Monday. Ukraine claimed that a Shahed was detonated on the territory of Romania, and if so, that's huge. But the Romanians were saying Bucharest was denying that Ukrainian claim, saying that it wasn't over their territory, and I'm going to chase that down as well. Last couple articles, upwards of 20,000 amputees in Ukraine. That's a lot of amputees, and they're going to have to be dealing with quite a bit of trauma. But I talked about this a week ago where they were saying, now there was a Wall Street Journal article saying that there was 20,000 to 50,000, and the Pravda article that talked about the Wall Street Journal article said there's more than 50,000. But that's not what it was either Wall Street Journal or Times article said. And so they kind of lied about it. But even then, 20,000 is a lot of amputees. It wasn't RT, it was a Pravda article that did that. And then finally, a plastic inflatable wood foam decoys are a psychological weapon. I talked about that in the earlier video yesterday. I put out a morning video, and that's all I did yesterday because it's Labor Day and I was trying to actually enjoy some time. And so I did the one video, and yeah, that's one of the ways that Ukraine is dealing with counter drone operations using decoys like that, and it's absolutely fascinating. Okay, I've talked way too long here, but that was your week. And I hope that helps you have a lot more context for what's going on in Ukraine. If you're not subscribed to this channel, would you please consider subscribing? I'll be back tomorrow and I'll do more updates and keep you informed of what's going on in Ukraine. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes. Thank you for buying me a coffee. Thank you more than anything else for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.